Hello, everyone. Vidisha Suman, partner at Kearney, and I'm super excited to welcome all of you to our International Women's Day Forum at Kearney. We have been running this forum for probably 3 or 5 years now, and every year the conversations get a lot more interesting, the participation increases, and our whole intent behind these sessions is to start a conversation on important topics. And I'm super excited to be presenting and sponsoring the topic for today, which is around building an inclusive era as we get into what's being called the new AI world that we live in. And what does it really mean? I'll tell you a small story of how this whole conversation got into being. Emily, who leads our marketing team, she reached out to me that, hey, we should do a discussion on this with our, as part of our IWD panel. I said, that's great. And then the thought that came to my mind is I've been doing a lot of discussions with our clients on AI, having been in the tech practice and in the Bay Area. I'm also a board member for Junior Achievement of Northern California, and I lead the Women at Digital Advisory Board for the firm, which is, or both of those are focused on mentoring and guiding young women about careers in STEM and potentials in the world out there. And in all the discussions I've had with the next generation of women and even girls, high school girls, there are three things that stood out when I talk about AI. Number one is there is a growing importance being given to AI that's going to change the world that we live in beyond just the work we do or us as individuals. It's going to be a different era, the AI era, and it's real and people understand it, appreciate it, and quite a few of them are excited about it. The second thing, which was equally important and interesting, particularly speaking with high school students, is they ask a lot of questions about what I call the responsible use of AI. Since it is a given that we are getting into this new world of AI, how can I as an individual be more responsible? How do I need to think different and behave differently in this world as a student, as a practitioner in AI, and even for some of us as leaders in this world? And then the third piece, equally interesting, was when people would come up to me and say, hey, I'm so excited to see you lead this discussion. And I would ask them why. And they said, it's great to see women in this space, and it gives me a lot of hope and excitement that I can also make it. So the need and the importance of role models continue. And I don't claim to be a role model at all, but what we can do as individuals and leaders is initiate important conversations with us. And that's the hope for today's session as well. We have an amazing panel. Some of them are board members in my Women at Digital team as well. So I'm super excited to have this conversation, to listen in. And before I get started, I have to tell a short story about the moderator for today, Brunna. It was just a few years back, she joined us as a summer associate. She was doing her summers, and I was in Chicago back then, and that's where she was as well. Then she moved to New York, and I'm in the Bay Area now. But like, seeing her grow from being a summer intern to leading conversation with clients now on AI, it just fills me with a lot of excitement and pleasure to welcome her on stage as the moderator for the session. She's going to be asking the questions and introducing the panel. Before I hand it off to her, to all the people who are attending, I see almost like 100 plus people and counting. Please have this as a session where you listen and learn and also engage. You can use the chat function or the Q&A function on WebEx. Please put in your questions, and as we go through the discussion, Bruna and I would moderate some of those and make sure it gets addressed. And let's start the conversation, but let's not end the conversation with the 60 minutes that we have here. Continue it with your teams, with your organization, with your friends and family. So with that, I am super proud and excited to welcome Bruna on stage as a moderator for today's session. Hey, Bruna.
Hi, Vidisha. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. And I am very excited to be here. Vidisha, you made me reflect on, my journey for the past 3 or 4 years and how, our role is changing with this new technology, right? So with that, I am honored to introduce you to our panelists. So I would welcome Cristina Rieppi. Cristina is the EVP of Product Management at Circana, formerly the NPD Group. We are also going to welcome Charisse Jacques. Charisse is the COO for Customer and Category Management at Symphony AI. Hi, Charisse. Andrea Lo. Andrea Lo is the founding partner at Main Character Capital, who's going to bring a unique perspective of AI in the investment space. And finally, Arpita Ghosal. She's our director for our digital and analytics practice, and she's joining out of the other side of the world. So thank you, Arpita, for joining so late for you. Very excited to learn your experiences working with AI, investing in AI, or just really learning how to navigate this space. It's changing so much for data and analytics and other use cases that we have out there. So thank you all for joining us. All right. I'd like to get started, Andrea, with you. Myself, as a former entrepreneur, I am very, very curious to learn how is this space changing from an investment perspective. You have been investing in very different technologies from, blockchain, software as a service, fintechs, and some others, and now AI, right? What are the changes that you have been seeing in the investment landscape?
Yeah, great question. Well, thank you so much for having me. So excited to celebrate International Women's Day today with all of you women. As mentioned, I'm the founding partner of Main Character Capital. We're a new fund specifically that backs the most cutting edge investors focused on building a future for everyone. And I've spent the last decade as a founder, VC, corporate VC, startup executive, and also angel investor in AI-driven startups. So that's a little bit about my background. So I'll start with kind of what is the current AI investment landscape. And in 2023, we saw global VC investment decline. It actually dropped 35%. From the previous year. But at the same time, investment in AI grew by 10%. If you further dive deeper into that, you'll see that actually 2/3 of that investment is coming from large corporate investors like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, NVIDIA. And this space is characterized by kind of these crazy blockbuster investments. In particular, two companies, OpenAI and Anthropic, which you probably have heard of, received over 30% of all AI startup funding in 2023. As we move deeper into 2024, there's been a lot of guesses that AI investment is going to slow down because of high valuations, hype, a lot of regulatory concerns. People are, as we are, concerned about the reliability of the models and the bias, just not sure where this is all going to go. But as we're in Q1, we're seeing there isn't a slowdown, and we're still seeing these blockbuster investments. We're still seeing these follow-on investments led by big corporates. And so where are the big opportunities that I'm excited about and I think is particularly relevant for this audience? I think there's two areas. I think there's going to continue to be a shift from consumer use cases into enterprise AI use cases. We've seen just this week a big fintech called Kearney rolled out a chat client for customer service, and they think that that equates to 700 full-time customer service staff, and they think that's going to bring $40 million in cost savings this year alone. Some will hear this and think tremendous opportunity with cost savings. Some will be scared of the job replacement prospects, especially starting in customer service and sales. But I actually think there's tremendous opportunity, especially for women. If you zoom out and look at kind of AI tools as well, there's more than ever a plethora of tools that generate code, design, videos from scratch, which I believe will level the playing field for women. And so again, think that these enterprise AI use cases will really be a focus in 2024. And then lastly, I think industry-specific AI will be a big focus, vertical specific use cases across healthcare, energy, education, robotics, scientific research, you name it. In particular for women, I think an opportunity is women's health. For too long, clinical research and medical research has underrepresented women. And now life science businesses and healthcare companies cannot roll out tools if they don't provide something that serves everyone's needs. And it's very glaring that they have incomplete data in these areas. And so I think there's tremendous opportunity to collect more gender-specific data, demographic data, and even woman-centric R&D. So overall, I think a lot of shifts, but also a lot of opportunities. And so definitely a dynamic time.
Well, thank you, Andrea. And it's amazing how you're saying, there's AI, it's new for a lot of us, but it's already changing, right? It's already shifting from consumer to enterprise. It's already getting specific in each of these verticals. And Charisse, when we met last week, you mentioned that you have actually been working with AI for the past 5 years, right? And it's only making, to the mainstream for all of us, maybe in the last year or so. So looking backwards, even before this past year, when AI really became this big buzz, what are some of the changes that you have seen, particularly on client perspectives, from when you first entered the space until nowadays?
Yeah, Bruna, sure. Happy to share my perspective. First, just a little bit about Symphony AI. So we're a global company. We provide predictive and generative AI solutions, enterprise AI solutions, and we do that across a number of different industry verticals. I am in the retail and CPG vertical. So I've been here at Symphony AI for over 5 years, and for sure, we've been working with clients and talking to prospects, retailers, and CPGs about using AI. And it's funny, before it was a novelty. It was something that people thought were cool, but it wasn't something that necessarily took hold with everyone. Of course, there were the early adopters, and so we engage with those early adopters. And you fast forward to now, we mentioned that the consumer space, it's definitely hot topic, very popular in using Gen AI. So everyone's become a little more familiar with AI and what it can do in their own personal life. And I imagine everyone who's listening to in the audience has played around at least a little bit with ChatGPT or one of the other solutions. So people are becoming a little more familiar in their personal lives. So now when you think about using AI in an enterprise, in the business world, it's something everyone wants to talk about, something everyone is investigating. When we look at our clients are using AI, many of them starting with customer service and customer experience for sure, but they're also thinking about how can we use it internally? How can we use it to help us, either do our jobs, better, faster, make better decisions? And, a lot of them are, I'd say many are thinking about how do you use it to do the question, answer, response, kind of like a ChatGPT, which is the easy use case. It's a great starting point, but more advanced or more forward-thinking clients are also using it really more as a key core part of what they do in their organization, and helping them to understand not just what happened in their business, but why it happened within their business. And so even with all of the excitement and people being much more open and everyone actually wanting to understand AI better, particularly Gen AI, we still have the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, particularly when it comes to using it in an enterprise space. So that's my perspective. It's definitely interesting to see from 5 years ago to now, and it's a hot place, and everyone wants to talk about it, and we're excited to help them with it.
Thanks, Charisse. I like how you're touching on fear, uncertainty, and doubt of breaking into this new technology, right? And I am sure that's impacting executives from different industries in very different ways, whether they work with AI already or they are considering incorporating AI into their day-to-day. So Cristina, I wanted to flip the question a little bit to you, and you can go ahead and have your sip of water before that. I didn't mean to cut you off on that.
No problem.
So yeah, I wanted to flip the question to you from your role as an executive in data and analytics, right? Now executives, they need to make sense of AI and their implications for not only the offering and, solutions that their companies might offer, but also their teams, how they get work done, how can they incorporate and maybe get more productive with AI. It also comes with responsibilities and consequences on executives, right? So the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that Charisse mentioned. I would be very curious to learn your perspectives on it.
Sure, absolutely. So you introduced me before. I work for a company called Circana, which is a global market research company that started with NPD. I started with MPD, and with the merger of IRI, now I've joined this new organization. And again, we're a global market research company, one of the leading advisors on the complexity of consumer behavior. I've worked in a variety of different roles in the organization, both at NPD and now at Circana. I've worked on a lot of different tech transformation initiatives to now leading a product management function. And today I lead the retail product management team, and we are responsible for building innovative products for the retail segment of our business. I also lead the global analytics function for retailers. And today we use AI in a variety of functions at Circana. Much of it is sort of related to what Charisse talked about, which is, the question and answer response from an insights perspective. We also use AI to automate some of the manual interventions required to deliver market information to our clients. I think when I hear us talk about AI and something that Andrea touched on as well, there's a lot of positive impacts with AI. There's enhanced productivity by automating the routine and non-routine tasks. There's what I mentioned before in my particular industry. How do we automate insights to enhance the decision making, to make work easier for people? But there are consequences. Andrea touched on job replacement. I think that's a real concern, right? There's that human factor and the larger concern of how AI, generative AI, will replace jobs. And we know that is something that we need to address as leaders. I would say that, as executives, we have to acknowledge that human skills like emotional intelligence, critical thinking, leadership, complex problem solving, these are all human traits that are very hard for machines to replicate. So when we think about AI, we need to think about how it amplifies our abilities, not necessarily replaces everything that we do. And I think when we think about building a workforce and leading teams, I think we need to think about hiring for skills and competencies rather than credentials. So I did want to touch a little bit on the job replacement piece of it, and hopefully I answered some of your question.
Yeah, and I would love to get back into amplifying our abilities and hiring for skills and competencies later on a separate set of questions that I would have for all of you. Before we go there, Arpita, you've been working in this space for years now, right? Even before AI maybe was on the movies, but not necessarily, making it into these models and whatnot. So I wanted to understand from you, you've been working in this male-dominated sector, right? How have you seen AI evolve over time? Again, looking way back in the past.
Thank you, Brunna, and so honored to be here. Firstly, thank you to all the panelists and all the participants. And actually, my story is that I'm a banker turned consultant, right? And I kind of stumbled into the field of analytics and data. Like you said, it wasn't very glamorous by then. I had studied management, marketing, and analytical finance, and I was building marketing strategies. And I liked the idea of making marketing strategies more analytical. So I started learning analytical skill sets, right? And machine learning, which was actually there back then, just that nobody really talked about it. But like I said, I was working in a bank. I kind of grew into an analytical role. I started liking it because, there's all the techno-functional aspects. You can learn about business, you can learn about analytics, you can deep dive into the numbers, you can do art. And you can make better marketing strategies, you can make better risk management strategies. Like, our panelists are talking about the fact you could do better automation. But no one talked about gender diversity back then, right? And neither was I aware about it, right? I was doing my job, and somehow it felt that there were men and women around, and it didn't feel like it was a male-dominated industry. But what really happened is that when I switched over to consulting and I started working across geographies and industries, right? So I started working with client leaders, and then frontline specialists and IT teams and analytics teams and AI teams, and AI was kind of picking up then I kind of started to understand that there is what we call an underrepresentation, right? And the problem, I think, becomes a little more critical as we approach like leadership levels. So not always, right? But as an example, many times when you're doing like transformation projects, and like you said, right, I've been now working in AI and analytics for almost 2 decades. So multiple transformation projects that I've done across industries, across topics. Many a times your AI leaders would be men, right? You wouldn't find a lot of women leaders in the room, and a lot of times the client teams that I've worked with, right, they were heavily male dominated, and a lot of times, right, as a woman, as you're kind of growing into the field, you have to convince people about, the fact that you understand technology and you understand technical details, and you have the capability to kind of translate it into, business imperatives, right? But I mean, and like flash forward to now, right? Cut to now, we are talking about generative AI, and AI has become so much more glamorous, so to say. And there's all the democratization associated with people knowing about it, right? Organizations, societies are aware of like the business implications of AI. With that, I think, the biggest change that I would have seen, right, in terms of like gender diversity is also that higher level of consciousness, right, and awareness of the pitfalls of gender imbalances, which, like I was saying, right, when I started working in this field, not even understanding that, there is a potential gender imbalance, and it can have consequences on the way we build our models, the way, AI enabled decision making is happening. But now when you kind of go into like these AI transformation discussions, right, it's quite common for clients to talk about the fact, and many of those rooms are still male dominated, but they talk about the fact that, okay, we need women trailblazers, we need women leaders, we need to hire more, women technologists into our teams. And Vidisha talked about the fact that, like women students and young women who are entering the workforce, they are so much more aware and conscious, right? So again, not very uncommon when we go to recruit, right? You have young women who talk to us about, oh, what are you doing to increase diversity, right, across your AI teams? What are you doing to decrease bias across AI algorithms? And for me, right, and if you look at all the numbers, right, there's still an imbalance and there's still underrepresentation. And it's still, to a large extent, male dominated, especially as we kind of, go to senior leadership levels. But there is all that voice that is out there, right? There's just so much talk about it. And there's that, like I said, there's that higher level of consciousness, which for me is like the first step to like a larger transformation, right? Which is leapfrogged, I think, in the last couple of years. So that's kind of, like my perspective, and happy to kind of continue the conversation as the panel goes on.
Yeah,
Can I add something? Because
yes.
I think this is a topic you're going to touch on a little bit later. And I don't know if we're going to shift things around a little bit, but, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about diversity. And I just want to add to that I think that being inclusive boosts morale and opportunity. And that's something that we absolutely need to think about as we look to build diverse teams. Lower churn rates equal bigger savings in terms of time and money spent on recruitment. So making sure that we have diverse teams, I think that's one point I wanted to make. And from a product perspective, I can say that having a diverse team is a better reflection of our customers, right? So I just wanted to piggyback on that.
I love that build up, and it's actually a good segue to a few of the data points that I wanted to share around, just having underrepresentation in this space, right? Arpita, you mentioned the teams at the forefront of AI are still significantly male dominated, right? According to the World Economic Forum data, 78%, almost 80% of the AI professionals globally are still male, leaving only 22% of the workforce for women. And Cristina, you were just touching on one of the benefits of augmenting, representation in this space. I would be curious to learn what other benefits have you seen, not only on AI, but on your role as data and analytics from bringing, diverse perspectives into the groups and into the teams that you're leading?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about gender diversity, I just want to make sure that we're all, we're talking about men, women, transgender, non-binary. There are so many benefits. I think Arpita already talked about some of them. It's attractive to have diverse talent as we start to recruit. Most of the talented individuals, I think there was a study on that, go places that do better with diversity, right? Diverse teams generate more innovative ideas. They have different contexts, unique perspectives that I think lead to greater collective creativity. Diverse leaders tend to create and foster environments where new and creative ideas are considered. So, I think those are the sort of some of the broad stroke highlights.
And Andrea, I know underrepresentation is also not new for you as an investor, right? Similar data from VC suggests that only 1% of the VC funding that's actually going to AI projects is going to female-funded ventures. So I would be curious to learn from your perspectives how to tackle that issue and how to start closing the gap. 1%, if we take it one by one, that will be already doubling our representation.
Yeah. So that's a significant issue also, not only at the corporate level and company level, at the investor and founding level, you see significant gender disparities. I think a lot about gender parity and gender as an investor. As an investor, when I make decisions, I'm consistently trying to reduce my bias. I'm trying to have consistent inputs and consistent diligence processes. And I do a lot of factoring in of timing, right? Because if you're too early, you're still wrong. And then when I assess startups and founders and investors, I really try to understand the management team. And then the market and the product. And so obviously being a woman and in a minority, that gives me a different worldview than my male counterparts. I've worked under both male and female leadership teams and seen both with varying successes. Sometimes they have different styles, sometimes they don't. So I feel comfortable and can envision a management team like that. And I'm naturally going to understand markets a little bit differently given just who I am, right? I'm going to understand woman-led products, woman-focused markets better. And so what I personally try to do, and I hope that more people do this, is in terms of sourcing, that's a big part of investing, keeping the funnel pretty wide in who you talk to, whether they're founders or investors. I purposefully try to go to a lot of events and belong to many groups that are women only as well as male dominated. I think I get a lot of ideas from both groups, and naturally women feel comfortable with me because I understand. But then all of us have been in male-dominated industries for so long, so we also know how to survive in those industries as well. And so I think overall, like you said, diversity is male, it's female, it's co-ed, and being open-minded is really the key part. And as a result, I've invested in male-led, female-led, co-ed teams, and they've all done really well. It comes down to them deeply understanding their market and the use case. And so how do we improve these numbers specifically? I think there's 3 areas. The same way we've been talking about how AI and machine learning and data is improving other sectors, we can apply this to the investment space. I'm talking to a number of firms, investment firms, who are now utilizing AI to source deals. So hopefully there's less bias. They can source across geographies, across stages, and look for very specific criteria. I'm meeting a lot of folks that are using the data in the diligence process to strip out biases. So there is generally more awareness. And again, just excited about people using these tools more. The second thing is, I think the role of the investor and founder is evolving with the advent of AI. Apparently now you can launch single person businesses and smaller companies, and you can learn how to launch code and design and video with these tools. So I think that's going to open up who is able to start a company and make it easier than ever to start a company, and continue to challenge us in thinking like, what kinds of businesses are there, and is the funding mechanisms support all of these different new businesses? Maybe not everyone is venture backable, right? And then I think also I touched on the fact that there's a growing importance in corporate investors. Maybe you don't have a Wall Street background, but if you've worked in a corporate, you know how a corporate thinks about buying decisions, M&A decisions. And so that's an important part of investing as well. And then lastly, I think we need to continue to be open-minded about what progress looks like. I think the media tends to sensationalize things. The recent headline was, oh my goodness, less than 2% of female-only founders get funded, and that's dropped year over year. And it's like, but if you zoom in and you look at co-ed founding teams, that number has actually increased, right? And so I think we need to be realistic about what progress looks like and realize it's going to be incremental, but it's happening. So again, pretty positive, and excited.
Well, I love that we're actually making progress on these conversations and that the numbers are backing that, right? And you touched on something that made me reflect on one of the 3 things that Vidisha mentioned earlier on, right? Like the responsible use of AI, and how being conscious on the outset when you're actually sourcing those ventures might start, shifting the conversation around. And we know that AI is built on, data and logic. So the insights that we get out of AI are only really good as the data and logic that's built on it, which means that there's a big potential for algorithm bias in the insights and recommendations that we're reading out of these large language models. And Charisse, I know you work a lot with, as you mentioned, consumer analytics, consumer insights for retailers and whatnot. I wanted to get a little bit of your perspectives on why is it important, one, for us to train these data sets in a way that will tackle that unconscious bias, and 2, how can we, by bringing these diverse perspectives, open-minded that Cristina and Andrea were talking a little bit, can help us develop models that are not gonna, shine a light in, that are not gonna be biased.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think about building models, and for sure, the training data set is one part of the puzzle of eliminating bias. And having, representative samples makes a big difference. It makes a big difference. So you're not making, ultimately your models are not making decisions that are based on a biased point of view. If I think about the space that we operate in and use one example, and you're building, if we're building a model to help people understand what they should do with the promotions, that they are going to have in their stores, and you're building, your model, and you're training it on a data set that isn't representative of all of the different segments of consumers, whether it's, demographic segments, it's, lifestyle segments, price sensitivity segments. All of those things become really important so that your model, is representative of how it will be used when, the end user is actually using it to make real decisions to drive business. But I think the data is just a part of it. Quality outputs have to do with the data for sure, but it also has to do with the person who's training the model, right? The person who's coming up with the algorithms, the person who's, figuring out what to do. And so having diverse perspectives is important. It's important to ensure that we are challenging our assumptions from different points of view. The more you can have a different perspective to challenge what you're doing, the better your outcome is really going to be. And then the other way that people play a role is actually the testing of the models. And again, having a diverse point of view, because everyone sees things from a different perspective. We've all lived different lives. We've all, seen things again from a different angle, and bringing that into the testing of the outputs of your model comes back to being able to really effectively challenge assumptions and again, get to that, better output. So I think the data for sure is important, but I also think the people are just as important and maybe more important, because the people are doing something with the data and how the data is being used. And so having a diverse point of view is really, really important. And I think it was Cristina who mentioned this, particularly in spaces that are consumer facing and retail for sure, and consumer packaged goods. I mean, the majority of shoppers are women, right? So you definitely want to make sure you have that point of view and that perspective. And Andrea talked about it when it comes to healthcare, and making sure you have someone who has lived that life, who can provide, a challenge of assumptions from their own perspective. Again, you don't want decisions based on an N of one, but you want to have the different thought process into what you're doing. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, very connected to what Cristina mentioned early on about amplifying the importance of the human role in this end-to-end value chain of AI modeling, right? So I want to transition now into changing this space. So how can we change? How can executives that are joining us today and women that want to break into this space learn and augment on some of the success stories that you might have to share? So, Cristina, I wanted to start with you. What advice would you have for executives that are in data and analytics and that are now navigating this space, right? And that are now managing or leading teams that are either incorporating an AI on their day-to-day or just thinking about how to incorporate AI in their company solutions?
I think, it's really sort of a summary of everything we've discussed. It's making sure that we've got diverse teams that are really equipped to address some of the challenges that we see in the space. It's interesting. I think executives need to think about it, but also I think sort of a level below executives, right? Like we've got an entire workforce of women of all levels that need to think about how do we upskill, how do we prepare to be to contribute in this particular space, and I was just thinking outside of AI and just thinking about taking a step back and thinking about a career and what it means to be a leader, and some of the advice I'd give people at sort of the initial stages or even sort of midway in their career, which is sort of the less about AI. But someone asked me recently, what career advice would you wish someone had given you early on in your career? And I think about this a lot. And one of the things that I think has served me really well is building a reputation for figuring it out, whatever it is. Because if you can do this, people will fight to have you on their team. And this to me translates a lot because of the upskilling, and hiring for competencies and hiring for not necessarily just hiring for those competencies. So that's just something I keep in mind. And something else that someone's asked me recently in that same sort of conversation, which is like, how do we advocate for equity in our organizations and in our institutions? And, you know, one of the things that I always think about is sort of how my mentors and how my sponsors have advocated for me throughout my career, how they've given me feedback. And we need to continue to do that as women in this space. We need to give, other women feedback so that they can challenge themselves and drive change. So a little more generic, less about AI, but I think it all applies.
I love that. And I'm sure it's going to resonate a lot with a lot of the people that are joining our call. Anyway, so I would want to unpack a little bit more of the mentorship component as well and open it to all the others in the panel, Arpita, Charisse, Andrea. Anything that you would give as an advice for, young woman looking to break into this space or just learn more from it?
I can share more from folks that are aspiring to be founders or investors in the space. I think, again, I'm pretty optimistic. I think when you have rapid changes in technology, this is an opportunity. And if you have curiosity and the desire to learn rapidly, you can get really far fast. If I look at my past decade of experience, I moved roles and job functions and sectors, and I jumped into new frontier markets like blockchain and then fintech in emerging markets. And that really kept me sharp because I had to keep reinventing myself and learning. And you can't really ask for 15 years of experience in a new industry, right? And so this is really an opportunity for folks. And so, again, I think it's easier than ever to start a company. There's more data and resources available than ever. And so really what's in short supply is this motivation and willingness to learn. And so that can really set you apart. And like I said, with investors, it's going to continue to evolve what a good investor means, especially as technology gets more nuanced and ethics come into play. And AI in some ways has really shined a light on how important bias is and how much it affects us. And so I think people are realizing more and more, like, if we're going to build tools, we need more age groups, more women, and all kinds of perspectives. And so I, again, really think this is an opportunity to just go out there and learn and make a name for yourself in a very specific space. So.
Can I? Oh, Arpita, go ahead.
No, I think just to build onto that, I kind of wanted to share a story about, a young data scientist, right? So it's a very interesting, like a hackathon, which we did recently. And you had this very young woman, right? No background in data science, just learned coding. And one of the things that she did is that she was kind of given a biased AI system, right? That was the intent of the hackathon. And she came out with like a really creative idea, which is that, the AI system was about disbursing loans to small women and entrepreneurs, right? And one of the input variables was the amount of funding that the entrepreneur had taken in the past. And we had deliberately gamed the system, right? It's because usually women entrepreneurs are more cautious and they don't take a lot of funding in the early stages, right? And if you use that as a variable, what ends up happening is that even though your intent is not to discriminate against women entrepreneurs, but you end up giving them less funding because you're using the past indicator as one of the variables to discriminate, right? Or to make your AI-enabled decision making. And this, this young woman with no background in data science, right? Very little coding, kind of came out with this output, right? Which to me is incredible because it tells me that it's not just education, right, which determines the path into whether you can join a AI profession or not, right? It's the intent, it's the confidence, it's the spirit of innovation, continuous learning. So AI is not just about, sitting in a room and, coming up with these fancy algorithms. It is actually thinking about the potential implications of what these AI systems can do. And to me, this young woman is a classic example of the kind of young women we want to enter into this field, right? So for me, this is this is kind of the future, right? You want to encourage diversity in, whether it be educational backgrounds, whether it be, where you live, where you come from, irrespective of your gender, sexual orientation, everything, because when you have like these diverse set of backgrounds, you can come up with these breakthrough insights, right? Which a very technical data science, an algorithmic kind of approach wouldn't have enabled you to reach, right? Because a very technical person would have just looked at all the features and said that, okay, I'm going to go with the feature that makes the most statistical sense, right? While you had a very diverse point of view who kind of came up with like a breakthrough insight because this AI system was gamed to be flawed, right? So I just kind of wanted to share this story to so maybe hackathons and innovative championship challenger strategies, etc., are one way in which we can encourage, right, young women to enter this space and kind of show them the potential of what lies ahead.
I'd love to piggyback on that. I think, Arpita, you've raised a number of great points, and it's the inspiring, but it's also the education of the young women about all of the different ways that you can contribute in AI. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a data scientist. I look at the teams that I lead. Yeah, they're engineers, yeah, they're data scientists and analytics professionals, but we have domain experts who know retail in and out. They are helping us. They are giving us the perspective we need to ensure that our generative AI prompts are the right prompts for the industry. You don't have to be an engineer or data scientist to do that. Cristina mentioned, she's in product management. Product management, is another one. There's so many product marketing. There are so many ways in which you can contribute in AI. And the more we are out there and helping, girls and young women see all of the diverse ways in which they can contribute and play a role in AI really helps us. And, I like to say that the more our companies encourage us to do that, the more it actually helps our companies, because we look like a really forward-thinking company that has women who are out there trying to bring more women in, right? Reaching back and bringing in others. So I think your points are really spot on. And I think about just one really quick story. I'm involved with build.org. So I'm on the regional board for California. And I was in a session and, you introduce yourselves. And afterwards, a young girl came up and she said, wow, you're in AI? Wow, there are women doing that. And it was just small comments, but it was just really meaningful. So I think the more all of us are out there and showing we have different backgrounds, but we're able to contribute in AI, the more we inspire them to do that.
Oh, thank you for sharing. I love how you ended the story. And I'm really taking away with me, setting the right intention and being conscious of the outset is beyond the data, right? Charisse, you mentioned this. Data is only the tip of the iceberg when we're dealing with AI. There's so much more to unpack, and we don't need to be experts in software engineering or data engineering to actually, understand what are the insights that we can derive from AI. So I want to transition it to the audience. I know there's a few questions that are already coming in the chat. Please continue to share those questions. We are going to prioritize them and start discussing about some of them. So one of them is around diversity and inclusion principles and how can we incorporate diversity and inclusion initiatives into an AI roadmap? How can we formate diverse committees or frameworks so that we make sure that we have the right perspectives when we're addressing AI bias? I would make this question even broader, and not only looking at AI, but also any data and analytics, right? What are the different structures and committees that a company might put in place to make sure that we are tackling the bias component of AI?
So I can start. I think some of my panelists, mentioned just the, if we're thinking about hiring people who are going to work, in our companies and working in AI, and making sure that we have, a diverse set of folks who are evaluating those folks is a key part of it. The hiring, and it was discussed differently here, but the hiring for potential versus just performance, so, Christine, I think it was talked about, the skill sets, and hiring, for that, because they have the potential to do that, is another, key factor. You can also think about just making sure that the, again, if we're talking about the hiring of bringing people in, the slates of candidates that, we have, and making sure they're diverse, the normal practices that we would do generally also apply to AI. So that's one perspective. Maybe my panelists have another point of view as well.
I would add to that it's that unique sense of voice that comes. I think it comes from within, right? So you have a diverse organization when both leaders walk the talk, they are accountable, they make themselves accountable. Plus, the employees advocate, right, and can speak for themselves, because you can form 100 communities, and you can form 100 forums, and you can form 100 best practices. And AI as a discipline is interdisciplinary, right? So you have collaborative code bases, you have people from different teams who form squads, who work together, who work with business, because you are supposed to understand the industry, right? The imperative of applying AI algorithms. You work with technologists, right? So they are interdisciplinary teams. So by design, we are meant to share best practices, right? But what actually works is diversity works, I think, if you advocate it, right? So if leaders advocate and walk the talk and make their teams and make AI-enabled decisions diverse, along with the employees, right? And, we talked about the workforce. The workforce also has to be personally accountable to make sure that, they are incorporating a diverse point of view. So for me, it's that, when institutions are in synergy with employees, and, together we kind of take accountability, we are kind of on that path to, have diverse organizations and more ethical and transparent decision making.
I would add to that just like a culture of psychological safety. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most junior people, and you have to really create forums to allow people to feel comfortable to express themselves. And by showing that you don't get penalized by coming up with different ideas or suggestions, and you actually do implement them, goes a long way in people actually feeling comfortable expressing their real opinions.
Cristina, anything from you, particularly looking at any more formal structures that large companies can put in place to make sure that this bias is addressed?
Well, I think, Charisse talked about the hiring process. I think that's a really interesting one to tackle, right? And it's funny, like, how can you use AI in recruiting is an interesting one, right? Like, how can we use the machine and the people who train the machine to analyze large sets of personnel data in hiring decisions? And how can we try to remove bias in those functions? Like, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I love what Andrea and Arpita said about sort of, it's like we have to walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to, like, we bring people in, we bring in diverse talent. How do we keep them? And how do we continue to foster sort of that creative thinking at all levels of the organization? So, I love what everyone said here. And It's right on.
Thank you, Cristina. We actually have one question, which is around using AI for talent management. So the question is, how can AI be integrated into our talent acquisition and retention strategies? And do you have any examples when AI was utilized to enhance leadership approaches, coaching, and cultivate a more inclusive environment?
I heard a story, I can't remember where, and it's actually somewhat similar to what Arpita talked about, which is a company who used AI in terms of looking and scanning resumes, and it was trained on data based on what they'd done before. But of course, their practices weren't great because they ended up with a diverse workforce that wasn't that diverse. So it kind of comes back to, even if you're going to use it in hiring, you want to make sure you're not just looking at the resumes of the people you selected, but the ones you didn't. And another thing I had heard about was a company who did that. They looked at the resumes they didn't select, and they, crossed off all of the names and anything that was gender or race identifying. And they found that there were so many more candidates that, actually would have, met the mark. So it's interesting when I think about those stories, and as companies think about using it for hiring and recruiting, we want to make sure that that training data set is not just based on the decisions you made in the past.
Absolutely. And we've gone that approach of removing names and any kind of identifying information from our resumes. So that's interesting.
You can also use, I think, like AI for, personalizing learning outcomes. And that's one way in which you can, upskill your workforce. So that's an incredible benefit, right? It's self-driven. You can kind of teach the AI system what you want it to do, give it proper guidance. Now with Gen AI, so much more is possible, and you can get the kind of learning outcomes that you want to upskill in the organization. Maybe you want to change your function, go into a new job role, right? AI can actually personalize that path for you.
Well, ladies, this has been an amazing session, truly inspiring, and I am really going away with a few actionable things that I can do. And that's really the most important thing, right? Like, how can we actually start changing now so that this new era that we're building, to Vidisha's point, is more responsible and conscious? So on behalf of Kearney and our Global Women's Network, I wanted to thank you all for attending the session. The four of you as our panelists, and all the people that attended our group that shared questions. This was a very engaging conversation, and I invite you all to join our website. There are a few events that are coming out, and I want to encourage everyone to just get the conversation going. Right? This is not a one-off panel. We are going to continue to facilitate these discussions and publish some of the findings and the key takeaways from our conversation today. So thank you all for joining.
For having us.
Thank you so much.